So this is Luke chapter 20, the scripture for May 11th. In this chapter, Jesus moves to a more sustained, direct conflict with the religious leaders. Because every matter must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, as it says in the law, for the leaders to confess John's authority in this first interaction would be tantamount to acknowledging Jesus' authority. Because when John baptized Jesus, not only did Jesus offer testimony to it, offer witness to it, but John offered witness. And then there was the heavens were opened and the dove descended and God spoke. And so to say that John's baptism held authority meant that Jesus held authority. But the Pharisees couldn't say no, because if John's baptism did not hold authority, well, the entire crowd would turn against them. I think the religious leaders here offer a perfect example of what it looks like to govern based off fear, to govern based off love of power, and to not admit you're wrong. We see this far too frequently in our national leaders today, which is heartbreaking. Had these religious leaders been honest, they wouldn't have said, "We don't know." They would have said, "We're taking a calculated stance that we can't say one way or the other because we don't like either of the situations." Or they would have just said yes or would have just said no and dealt with the consequences, because that's what good leadership looks like. I think in my mind, this is when Jesus gives up on the Pharisees. He's extended them a massive amount of grace at this point, and it's pretty clear that they don't care about the crowds. They just care about the power that they have. In the parable of the wicked tenants, Jesus clearly links his work with that of the prophets, and clearly links the scribes and the chief priests with the tenants who killed God's messengers, the prophets, and anyone who was sent by the king in this parable. The meaning of this parable was clear to the people. You'll note that in verse 16, they react when the landowner says that he's going to take this vineyard away from them and give it to others. The people react because they know that Israel and the inheritance that God promised the children of Israel is often referred to as a vineyard in the Old Testament. See, for example, Isaiah 5. So when Jesus says the vineyard will be torn from the tenants and given to other people, he's saying that God has given up on the children of Israel. That's scary stuff. So after fielding a couple questions in quick succession from folks trying to trap him, Jesus carefully not only answers these direct questions they offer him, but also exposes some of the hidden assumptions and some of the questions behind the questions. No one likes paying taxes, for example, yet to suggest people shouldn't pay taxes like the religious leaders were trying to get Jesus to do, that would upset the civic leaders of the day. So Jesus threads the needle and says, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar, give to God what is God." Likewise, when the Sadducees, who didn't believe in the resurrection, ask him a very convoluted question getting into issues of Levitical marriage, which was a common practice then. If you died without offering progeny to your spouse, then your spouse could remarry your brother, sort of thing. So in respect to the question about the resurrection, Jesus uses Scripture and the testimony of Scripture to refute the assumptions behind this bad faith question. Jesus doesn't just ignore the question, but he answers it in a way that can convince the people, look at the assumption that's incorrect behind this. And then, as was customary, Jesus responds to these questions by lobbing a question back at those who asked him this question. And having bested the Pharisees and Sadducees in this pseudo-debate, Jesus now takes aim at the Zealots, which was the third of 4 common religious sects at that time. There were the Essenes, the desert folks who were separatists. There were the Pharisees, who were the new religious order on the block, didn't have a whole lot of money, but were really passionate about following God's law. The Sadducees, who were the conservative party of old money, and then the Zealots, who wanted to throw off Roman rule. So Jesus takes aim at the Zealots by attacking the idea of throwing off the Roman Empire and restoring the nationalism of the Davidic Empire. It's a stunning move because it alienates one of the only establishment factions that may have backed Jesus in the coming week. Instead of taking their backing, he throws them out. He says, I don't need you. And those who think that the Messiah is going to be David's son, as if the Messiah is somehow going to reinstitute David's kingdom like you knew it, you're wrong. You missed the point. So Jesus ends this chapter by lambasting those who use the trappings of religion for sake of appearance, but don't practice what they preach. I wonder, when have you been more concerned about perception than about truth? That's all for Luke chapter 20. Tomorrow, May 12th, we'll be looking at Luke chapter 21. May God bless you in your reading of Scripture.